Hello everyone, Max here from Evidence-Based Football Manager. This is the sixth and final episode of this youth intake analysis series for FM23. I'll be covering two different topics today. Firstly, I'll be looking at some variables in the game that are related to club geography, such as population and economic development, and find out whether those variables have an influence on your youth intakes. Secondly, I'll be investigating how the size and the extent of draft pools of new gens are determined in the game. At the end of the video, I'll be making a summary of everything that I've talked about throughout this youth intake series, since this is going to be the last episode of this series. Okay, let's start with the first topic. Clubs in Football Manager are all assigned 6 tiers of geography. Those 6 tiers are stadium, city, local region, nation, region, and continent. For example, Manchester City is a club that belongs to the Etihad Stadium, which belongs to the city of Manchester, which belongs to a local region called Northwest, which belongs to the nation of England, which belongs to the region of UK and Ireland, which belongs to the continent of Europe. There are some parameters attached to these geographical tiers that sound like they might have an influence on the quality of your new gens. For example, I'm looking at the pre-game editor now, and you can see here that cities in Football Manager have parameters such as inhabitants range and attraction. Local regions have this parameter called population. And also, the nations in Football Manager have these parameters like game importance and state of development. These parameters are not visible while you're playing the game, but they can be viewed and edited using either the pre-game editor or the real-time editor. So we're going to find out whether these 5 parameters that are related to club geography can affect the quality of your new gens. As always, for these experiments, I used my Youth Intake League, which is a custom league that I've made myself using the editor. There are 8 teams in the Youth Intake League, and those 8 teams were assigned varying degrees of youth recruitment ratings and club reputation. I prepared 3 different save files. In the first save file, the parameters under investigation were set at their minimum possible values. In the second save file, those parameters were set as their middle values. And in the last save file, those parameters were set as their maximal possible values. I simulated the Youth Intake League starting from the 5th of December, which is just before the Youth Preview event, until the 20th of March, which is just after the Youth Announcement event for the teams of the Youth Intake League. At the end of each simulation, I recorded the CA ratings and the PA ratings of new gens from the 8 teams of the Youth Intake League. And let's take a look at the results. I have 3 bar graphs here that show you the average CA and PA ratings of new gens from the teams of the Youth Intake League. The graph on the left is when the parameters being tested were set as their minimal values. The graph on the middle is when the parameters were set as their middle values. And the graph on the right is when those parameters were set as their maximal values. And if you compare these 3 tables, you can tell that the differences between these 3 graphs are negligible. For example, if you take a look at new gens from Team A, in the first graph, they had an average CA rating of 43.5. And in the last graph, the average CA rating is 43.4, which is extremely similar to the first graph. And if you take a look at Team H new gens, in the first graph, they had an average PA rating of 72.1. And in the last graph, they had an average PA rating of 72.6, which is also very similar to the first graph. So yeah, negligible differences between these 3 scenarios, which leads me to conclude that the 5 types of parameters that I was testing related to club geography have no impact on the CA or PA ratings of new gens. Alright, let's move on to the second topic for today. We're trying to find out how the draft pool of new gens is determined in Football Manager. Remember back in the part 4 video, I told you that youth intake in Football Manager works like a draft, which means that there is a pool of new gens generated every season, and different teams take turns to make a pick from that draft pool of new gens. Well, the question is, how many clubs are participating in a single draft pool? Does every city have their own independent pools? Does every nation get their own pool, regardless of how the clubs are distributed in that country? these are the questions that I'm trying to answer. I have made some changes to the Youth Intake League this time. Until now, all 8 clubs of the Youth Intake League were part of the same league structure, and they were all based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. This time I separated the Youth Intake League into 2 separate tiers. Team A, B, C, D are part of Youth Intake League 1, which is the first tier league, and Team E, F, G, H are part of Youth Intake League 2, which is the second tier league. The purpose of preparing a tiered league structure is to find out if different leagues that belong in the same nation share a single draft pool, or if they provided their own separate independent pools. Also, the geographical location of these clubs were changed as well, as follows. Team A and B are based in Den Haag, which is a city located in the Zuid-Holland local region in the Netherlands. Team B and C are based in Amsterdam, which is located in the Noord-Holland local region in the Netherlands. Team E, F, G, H that are part of the second tier league are all based in Utrecht, which is a city that's based in the Utrecht local region in the Netherlands. Youth recruitment ratings were set as 10 out of 20 for all 8 clubs. Club reputation was varied across the 8 clubs. For example, Team A's club reputation was set as 6,000. Team B's club reputation was set as 5,750. Team C's club reputation was set as 5,500, and so on. Remember in the previous video, I told you that when clubs make their picks in the youth intake draft, the order of the draft is determined primarily according to youth recruitment, and if clubs have the same youth recruitment rating, club reputation acts as a tiebreaker. Since these 8 clubs all have the same youth recruitment rating, club reputation will determine the order of the draft, so Team A will go first, followed by Team B, followed by Team C, and so on. And let's take a look at the results. Again, I have a bar graph here that shows you the CA and PA ratings of NewGens. You can see here that Team A NewGens had the highest average CA and PA ratings, and there is a gradual descent in the CA and PA ratings all the way from Team A to Team H, although there isn't too much difference between the last 4 or 5 clubs. This is because when these clubs are taking their turns in the draft, the best NewGens are always snapped up by Team A, B, C, and maybe D. So by the time the last few teams are having their turns in the draft, they're all just fighting for leftover scraps, which is why we're not seeing much difference between these last 4 or 5 teams. Anyway, the fact that there is a single gradual descending curve in the CA and PA ratings of these NewGens suggests to me that all these teams are drafting from a single pool of NewGens. If different cities or different local regions had their own independent draft pools, Team A and B would be drafting from one pool, Team C and D would be drafting from a different pool, and Team E, F, G, H would be drafting from yet another pool. And the bar graph would show spikes between Team B and C, and also between Team D and E, rather than showing a single gradual descent. Also, if Youth Intake League 1 and Youth Intake League 2 had their own independent draft pools, Team ABCD would be drafting from one pool, whereas Team EFGH would be drafting from a separate pool, which means that in the bar graph, I would expect to see, firstly, a gradual descent between Team ABCD, followed by a spike between Team D and E, followed by a new gradual descent going from Team E to Team H. But that's not what we're seeing here. The fact that I'm seeing a single gradual descending curve from Team A all the way to Team H tells me that all these 8 clubs are drafting from a single pool of NewGens, despite all these clubs being located in different cities throughout the Netherlands and being split into 2 different leagues. To prove the point even further, I've conducted another test where I just made one change. I tried changing club reputation of Team E from 5,000 to 6,500. So in the previous test, Team E's club reputation was 5th out of the 8 teams, but now Team E's reputation is the highest out of the 8 clubs. And if you take a look at this new bar graph, you can see that the CA and PA ratings of Team E NewGens have gone up quite a bit compared to the previous bar graph. Team E New Gens now have the highest CA and PA ratings out of the 8 clubs. And not only that, the CA and PA ratings of other teams in the league have dropped by significant amounts compared to the previous bar graph. For example, in the first graph, Team A's PA rating is 83.3 and Team B's PA rating is 76.2, but in the second graph, Team A's PA rating has fallen to 78.3 and Team B's PA rating has fallen to 72.4. The fact that changing the club reputation of Team E has affected not just Team E but all other teams in the same nation prove that all these teams are sharing a single draft pool of new gens regardless of their geographical distribution and the level of their leagues. All 8 clubs in the test, despite being located all over the place in the Netherlands, are all sharing a single pool of new gens. Unfortunately, the question of the geographical extent of the draft pool in Football Manager still isn't completely resolved. In the youth intake league that I used for these experiments, all 8 clubs in the test belong to the same nation in the Netherlands, which means that while these tests do prove that clubs in the same nation share a single draft pool, they don't answer whether multiple nations can share a single draft pool. The question of whether each nations have their own draft pools or not remains unanswered. I have conducted some experiments using real leagues in FM23 in order to investigate the matter, but unfortunately I have had some trouble coming up with a definitive answer because it's a bit tricky to set up a test that involves multiple leagues from multiple nations at the same time. I won't discuss the details of those tests here today because, like I said, there were some limitations on how those experiments could be conducted. Alright people, now I'm going to make a summary of everything that I've talked about throughout this youth intake analysis series. Here we go. Youth intake in Football Manager consists of 2 main components. The first component is the youth preview event, which takes place in December for most leagues in Europe that have a mid-year start. The second component is the youth announcement event, which takes place sometime in March or April, again for most clubs in Europe. Youth preview is when the clubs participate in a draft to pick their new gens for that season's youth intake. Clubs that belong in the same nation share a single pool of new gens, regardless of their geographical location and regardless of which league tier they belong to. When clubs make their picks from the draft pool, priority is given to clubs with the highest youth recruitment rating, and if multiple clubs have the same youth recruitment rating, club reputation is acting as a tiebreaker. At the youth preview event, the names, the playing positions, and the nationalities of your new gens become locked in. Although the basic personal details of your new gens are determined at youth preview, the CA and PA ratings of your new gens remain highly fluid until a youth announcement. The CA and PA ratings of new gens are affected by a range of factors, which I will display on the screen. There is only one factor that can influence the personality of your new gens, and that factor is the personality of your head of youth development. The head of youth development only affects the personality of your new gens without affecting their CA or PA ratings. The cutoff date for these variables are just before the youth announcement event, which means that you can improve all these variables as late as 1 day before the youth announcement event, and they will still influence the CA or PA ratings of your new gens. If your club has an affiliation with a junior affiliate club, there's a chance that your club will spawn a new gen whose nationality corresponds to the nationality of your affiliate club. The quality of these affiliate new gens is affected by a range of variables related to your own club, as well as by some variables related to the affiliate club. Do take note that these affiliate new gens will spawn as part of your youth intake only if there is a particular clause that is active for the affiliate club. The clause that you're looking for will look something like this. Team E will benefit with some of these players coming through their youth team ranks. If this clause is visible in your affiliate team page, then yes, there is a chance that you will get some affiliate new gens every year as part of your youth intakes. Now, while there is a range of variables that can influence the quality of your new gens, there is still a lot of luck involved when it comes to the youth intake game mechanics in Football Manager. You can maximize all the club facilities, raise your club reputation, hire the best head of youth development, etc. And you might still get disappointing youth intakes for years if you're unlucky. But have faith and keep maximizing those variables as much as you can, and you will one day be blessed with a golden generation of new gens. By the way, when your head of youth development tells you that you're getting a golden generation of new gens, don't get too excited. The alphabet ratings and the star ratings provided by your head of youth development is very unreliable. Make your own assessments on your youth candidates and decide for yourself whether you should offer contracts to your new gens or not, rather than placing too much faith in the words of your head of youth development. Alright folks, that brings us to the end of this youth intake analysis series. I have to say there are still some unanswered questions regarding the youth intake game mechanics in Football Manager. Every time I do these Football Manager research, I feel like I can just keep digging more and more, and I'll just keep discovering more and more secrets. But I do feel like I've covered the gist of the youth intake mechanics in Football Manager, so I do feel that this is a good point to stop for now. I feel that FM23 is coming to an end of its annual Football Manager life cycle. You know, the developers release a new version of Football Manager around October or November every year, so I probably have time to do maybe 1 or 2 more videos on FM23, and after that I might take a quick break while I wait for FM24 to be released. Anyway, thanks heaps for watching guys. I really appreciate all the support and all the kind words, and yeah, I will see you all next time.